Welcome to this Q&A wrap-up from the Feb 15th live Confluence Basics training. I've gone through the chat from that training, and I will be answering every single question, even if it was answered in the training in this video. I'm going to be going over each question and then pop into Confluence to give you an answer. And if you have other questions about Confluence, drop them in the comments. I've also added links in the description to upcoming live trainings, so you can jump in and ask your questions live there as well. The next one will be on February 28th at 8 a.m. Pacific time. That's UTC-8. All right, let's jump in. These aren't so much questions, more as statements, and I included them because there are so many things that I don't know. We all have things that we're learning. We all have things where we're a noob or new at a topic or idea. And I always encourage folks, raise your hand and say, I don't know about that. I don't know how to use this. I was unaware about something. There's nothing wrong with not knowing. It's only a challenge if we don't go and try and get the answer. And that gets a lot easier when you tell someone, I'm new at this, I need your help. So it was great to see this in the chat, and that is exactly why I'm doing these live trainings and doing these FAQ follow-ups to help folks like these three people and many, many others not be a noob anymore and to get confidence so they can use systems to help make their life easier. All right, on to the first actual question. This came up during this training, and it was very recently after a big event in Atlassian's lifecycle. They used to have three types of products, one called Server, one called Data Center, and one called Cloud. Now, Server was a standalone product that you could run on your own single server, and that has been turned off. There's no more support for that from Atlassian. So they've encouraged all of their customers to move over to Data Center, where a group manages its own data center group of servers that runs Atlassian products, or to the cloud service that they provide. In the demos that I do, they are all in Confluence Cloud. I don't have a data center that I manage to show, and typically only like really big clients or clients in very specialized areas would use data center because it gives them a lot more control over the version of Confluence being used, over how the servers run and what files are in there. But again, the demos that I will show are almost always going to be in cloud. This is a great question, basically asking, how do I get buy-in to use Confluence? How do I convince my team to go do it? I am actually putting together another live training session on adoption and change management. And change management in this context is, how do I change from using one system to using another one? In this point, maybe your company had been using SharePoint to share information. How do you shift them over to Confluence? And these lessons can be applied to any system, but we'll explore through the lens of Confluence. At a very high level, the way to do this is a lot of communication, a lot of discussions, and ensuring that leadership is bought into the need for the system. And getting that high-level support will make it easier to convince others. They can help put it in standard processes and operations. Identifying some users who could be systems champions, folks who get extra training and are super excited about it, is also important because they will go out and convince others that it's really great and that they should go use it. So this is by no means a small or simple question, but it's one that is very important because we will all be in instances where we're using new systems and have to convince folks to jump in and use them with us. But be on the lookout for a future training that will address exactly this and to give you some ideas on how to do it. I do have a Udemy course that covers knowledge base fundamentals, and part of that is building buy-in. So if you're curious, there's a link in the description on that as well. Here's a question about draft visibility. So I'm going to go into Confluence and walk through what I think this question is getting at. Here we have my Confluence instance, and I'm just going to open up a space. And what I'm looking for over here in my page tree is something in draft status. And I've got this page helpfully labeled @ exclamation point, exclamation point. That's a terrible name. I really need to change that. But this draft in the page tree is only visible to the creator. So someone else wouldn't necessarily see this because it's a draft. So the question was, how do we collaborate on them if I'm the only one that sees it? Well, if I open this draft up and you look up in the URL, it can be kind of hard to see. The word edit now appears in it. And this just means I'm editing the page. I can take this URL and give it to some other user. And if they just open it up in their web browser and they have sufficient access to see the space in the page, they will be able to also edit this document. And what we would see up in the top right here, right now there's one Robert in it. I'm going to just open up another tab. and access it, typically you wouldn't collaborate with yourself. But what we'll see in the top right, there's now two icons. There's an orange one and a green one. And then if I look closely, I can see that there's an icon showing where that other person is. So as I begin working on this, or as the other person begins working on it, I'll see where their cursor is and we can collaborate. I could then close this draft and it still wouldn't be visible to everyone. Or I could go and publish it. Someone did mention that their video got a bit blurry, which I'm sure was very annoying. Now that could be due to your settings in YouTube. So what I'll do is show you the video in YouTube, the recording of it, and all of my live ones will stay on YouTube, so you can go back and view any of them. But if you open up the video, and I've muted it so we don't hear it, you'll have this little gear setting, and then you have things like playback speed. If you're watching this as a recording, you can speed it up to get through it quicker. I do that a lot. But if you click on quality, you'll see there's an auto setting. YouTube will then downgrade the quality if it needs to based on your bandwidth. So in this case, it's very blurry. So this individual may just have been stuck on a lower quality. You can go in though and force it to whatever setting you would like. Now, depending on your bandwidth, this could result in some latency or a slow signal. So if this does slow it down a lot, you could rely on the auto and then come back later to watch the recording or drop it down 1 or 2 notches just so you can see it so it's not as blurry. Next, a question about, does Confluence track changes? Yes. Confluence will keep a running log of every change made to a page or a blog. I will find a page here, Confluence Basics. And then if I go up into the top right, I have this 3 ellipsis, this 3 dots menu. It has a page history option. I have found this very useful if I make a change to a page and maybe it's not a good change. But here we can see a running log of every change made. I can see that it automatically gives it a version. It tells me when it happened, who did it, which can be important, as well as the status of the page if that was used, and we can see the status up at the top here. And then if there was a comment on the version. Now, because I have permissions, I can also go in and delete versions. So if I needed to, if there was something sensitive or just got very long, I could go through and just start wiping out old ones. Now I can click on any one of these to see what the page looked like during that version. And we'll see here at the top, it's warning me, hey, this isn't the most up-to-date one. And I can then skip between the versions if I want to just compare them one after the other. But also I can compare 2 different versions. So I can check the box to the current and maybe version 5, and then click compare selected versions. And it will show me visually what changed. Now, green stuff is new, red stuff was removed, and blue is a formatting change. So here I can see the related Jira tickets section was added. This is a great way to see who did what when. This can be especially important on things like policy pages, where you want to make sure it's the most up-to-date policy, and you want to understand who maybe changed it, and maybe you got to go change it back. You can also revert those changes. So there is this restore button under actions that will let you go in and roll back the change essentially. I haven't personally had to do this very much, but there were some large environments I worked in where we did have to go back and restore a very old version of a policy because folks had changed it accidentally. Best practices for Confluence instance management as a Confluence admin. This question was outside the scope of the basics training. That training is intended for just average users how to create pages and edit things. But there are some best practices as someone managing an overall instance. So this isn't even a space admin. This is someone who maintains and manages the entire copy of Confluence for an organization. Off the top of my head, there's a couple of best practices. Things like ensuring your anonymous and guest access is controlled. Anonymous access can allow anyone to go into your instance in certain areas, and many companies don't want that because anyone on the internet could see your stuff. If that is being used, you're going to want to regularly go in and double check what is exposed just to make sure something sensitive doesn't get out there. Reviewing your licenses is also something you're going to want to regularly do. I've been in environments where terminated workers still had a license. They couldn't log in because they didn't have access to their company email anymore, but they were still consuming a license. So there's something broken in the system's ability to deprovision them. Managing user groups can also be very useful. You can put together groups of individuals, for example, by department, and then share entire areas with just those departments. If you're on data center, there's a lot more. I'm sure that there's best practice because you're managing those servers. Yeah, but a great topic. I'll encourage you to pop into the Atlassian community and see what else they can share with you. If you're very interested, drop me a comment, and I can also see about pulling together more information and maybe even do a live training for Confluence instance managers if that is useful. Can page usage be tracked? Yes. Or at least in Confluence Cloud. Generally, Confluence will keep track of who's been to a page. I'm just going to go back to the same Confluence Basics page, and then I'm going to go back to that ellipsis in the top right, the 3 dots, more actions, and I'm looking for analytics. Now, depending on the tier of Confluence you will have access to more or less analytics. Generally, at companies I work with, they have enough analytics just to see how frequently a page is visited. This by itself can be incredibly useful. I can see that this page was really popular for some reason at the start of the year, and it's kind of trailed off a little. And then for some reason near the end of January, it spiked up again. I have personally used this when I go through and audit pages. Someone asked about how do we get buy-in, and part of that is ensuring new content is available or old content is removed. So if I see pages that aren't being viewed very frequently or haven't been viewed in the past month or so, I might archive them to get rid of them. You can also see if the page has mentioned users and then if there's attachments. So there's a great deal of information that sits in here under that analytics option to let you see who's used the page and maybe give you some guidance in terms of should that page still be in Confluence or not. Not exactly a question. Import is the bomb. What they're referring to here is the ability to import a Google Doc or a Word doc as a page in Confluence. And I'll quickly show you what that looks like. I'm back in my instance. I'm going to create a new page. And up in the right, we have templates by default, but we also have an import menu. If I open that up, it's going to give me some options. And I happen to use Google, so I'll demonstrate this with a Google Doc. But if I click on this, I'll connect my Google account to this Confluence instance. Now, what that will allow me to do then is, with a pop-up, I can pick a page that I would like to pull into Confluence. I have a very small example here, but Confluence will suck that content into this page. This is great for groups that have a lot of content in Google Docs, in Word, in OneDrive, and want to convert them to Confluence, and can make it much easier to get that information in there. Your other option is basically to copy-paste, which you can do, but I usually don't recommend. Typically, I do this with groups when they have important information in Google Docs and they're also using Confluence. My goal is typically to have everything in Confluence because that's my source of truth for documentation. So where possible, I'll import it and then I'll get rid of that Google Doc, or I'll lock it down so it can't be edited and then refer people to that brand new page I'm now controlling in Confluence. So I do agree with this person. Import is the bomb. It's a great feature that not many people know about and is really, really useful. Can you touch on blogs before you leave? Yes, this question was asked near the end. I unfortunately didn't have as much time as I wanted to get to it. There are two main types of resources in Confluence. There's a page and there's a blog. Pages show up in my page tree in content. So in the bottom left here, everything in there is a page. Pages tend to be information that might change over time, like a policy, or it's something I want to display visually in a hierarchy. For example, this Confluence Basics page has some children under it, and those children have children, and those children can have children. I forget how deep these can go. They don't recommend going deeper than 3 or 4 or 5 layers, just because visually it gets very confusing. But pages are typically going to be information you want to structure. So for example, your HR team might have a policies page, and under that all their policies. Blogs, on the other hand, don't exist in your page tree. They'll exist up here. Blogs are really good for point-in-time information. Again, I have a very poorly named blog post. I use these a lot at my work to do product updates, or here's what happened in the past week, because that information will never change. The updates we made for the week of February 14th will always be those updates. I'll drop them in the blog, and that lets people know, hey, go to the blog for that type of update. Blogs are also displayed chronologically, We can see here I've got one blog post from 2023 and another one from 2024. So this is a great way to show information over time, but each individual blog won't change. Beyond that, I can click the plus to create it, and the editing process, everything is identical, with the exception of templates. So that's the only thing lacking from a blog. But I've got all the other editing options and macros and everything else that I have on a page when I create a blog post. Those were all the questions I could pull out of chat for that February 15th training session. I will be doing another one of these February 28th at 8 a.m. Pacific. That's UTC minus 8. That'll be for 45 minutes, half an hour of training, 15 minutes of Q&A. And I also have more coming up in March, including one explicitly about templates. So going forward, I'll have one on general Confluence basics and one on a more detailed topic, macros, access, space management. Please drop your questions in the comments. If you like this, like it, subscribe, and share with your friends. And I really want to thank everyone who watches these videos and comes to those live trainings. I really enjoy helping folks learn these skills, and I can't do it without you. So thank you. All right. I'm looking forward to seeing you in another one of these again soon.